And with this comes many questions and many doubts. And today's webinar will comprise of two presentations from our two dear guests who are renowned experts in their respective fields. We have with us Dr. Muhammad Ubaidullah, who is the lead economist at the Islamic Development Bank, as well as the founder of IBFNet Group. We are also joined by Brother Rizal Breuer, who is the head of Data and Software Engineering Group at UIN Jakarta. So today's webinar, it's brought to you by IBFNet Group in collaboration with University Islam Negeri Sharif Hidayatullah Jakarta, Indonesia. And IBFNet is a group of companies in Ireland, Singapore, and Malaysia to develop and host multiple blockchain platforms and use cases and build a miniature Islamic economy focusing on philanthropy, not-for-profit, and even for-profit segments, aiming to convert traditional contracts into smart contracts using the Algorand protocol that are replicable and customizable for various financial contracts. Now, for a lot of the people here, some of these words might be new or they might even be interesting. So our speakers would be touching on what many of these words mean. So stay tuned for that. Now, as a special token of appreciation for all our viewers who are tuning in today for the webinar, you'll be receiving IBF tokens that power the IBF network exchange on the blockchain. So all further details on how these tokens can be used or how they can be redeemed, we will be emailing it to you soon after the webinar. During the presentation, if you have any doubts or any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll have them answered by our esteemed speakers. So without taking much more time, I would like to invite Dr. Ubaidullah to take the stage for our first presentation for the day, titled Going Green with Blockchain Applications in Islamic Finance. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Brother Zaid. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and very good morning to brothers, especially from Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And it's too early, perhaps, for Europe and the rest of the world. And today's presentation is basically on blockchain applications, and I will be focusing also on some specific use cases and the use cases that have been developed by IBFNet itself at its IBF DigiLabs, which is as what we call the kitchen, where we cook, and develop the solutions. And IBFNet, basically the solutions that we have developed so far, they use Algorand blockchain protocol, and they are primarily targeted at the Islamic finance space, and also trying to solve specific tensions and pinpoints in the development sector. So as they say, Islamic finance is good finance, and it talks about development, it talks about progress, and this is what we are going to see in the presentation. So allow me just a few seconds to share my presentation, to share my screen. Okay, as I presume not all of you may have a background in blockchain. So the first 2 or 3 slides, I'll just quickly take you through the conceptual foundations of the blockchain technology. And then we will move on to those areas of application in the context of an Islamic development economy, and also in the context of Islamic financial system where blockchain can be applied. Now, I would start with the first point that when you are looking at the conceptual foundations of this particular technology, you very clearly see a strong ethical dimension. It is rooted in ethics. And if you try to read any blog or any good article at a conceptual level about blockchain, you'll find that there is a frequent reference to terms as transparency, verifiability, traceability, immutability. Now these terms, what do they connote? What do they really imply? Transparency is, of course, as we understand, all the parties to a contract which are being brought in on the blockchain platform, for example, the technology ensures that they fully understand each other. Their actions, their implications are fully transparent, visible to the participants. So there are no hidden costs, there are no hidden aspects to any transaction. And blockchain certainly goes on to enhance the transparency that surrounds any kind of a transaction between the parties. Verifiability is again, whatever are the implications of a particular transactions, they are permanently etched on the blockchain, as we say, and that can never be tampered with. And since it cannot be tampered with, of course, it can be verifiable at any time subsequent to the time of the transaction. Traceability again, it's very, any transaction which is part of millions of other transactions, it is not only tamper-proof, not only transparent, but it's also traceable. So therefore, it is also possible, we are talking about blockchain applications, wherever traceability is very, very important. For example, you are talking about a halal supply chain, and where, we as Muslims, we are very, very particular about the way the animal has been dealt with, the way the source of the food itself, whether it is based on livestock or whether it is based on organic farming. Now these are areas where we would like to, as a consumer, and you can see this as within the domain of consumer rights as well, that a consumer has a right to know, right to trace the source of all those ingredients that are part of the value chain. And this is what is made possible under the blockchain technology. Immutability again, you have a possibility of bad actors everywhere, trying to really change the terms of or conditions that associated with the transaction. For example, we are talking about a stock issue by a company, and the traditional way is to issue a prospectus, for example, which contains, which is supposed to contain adequate and accurate information about the prospects of the venture. Now we have the regulations in place, which basically try to ensure that nobody bad actors don't try to, pass on information that is not only inadequate, but also inaccurate. There is a possibility of fraud or deceit. Now, this is what is supposed to be covered by regulation. And but then regulator has to, we know for certain that in the markets, they have to be eternally vigilant. Because ex post, there is also a possibility of bad actors trying to change the terms of association, change the terms of the transaction. Now, the same possibility you can, in a way, rule out in the context of blockchain technology, where bad actors cannot come in at a later stage and try to change the terms and the conditions of association or the conditions surrounding the transaction. So therefore, all these four terms that you find before you, they're usually bracketed, they go with economically, socially, ethical behavior that you have to, expect. You can always expect ethical behavior when the parties are trying to be transparent, they're trying to ensure verifiability to their transactions, and they are trying to make sure that their transactions are traceable, and also they're tamper-proof. They cannot be tampered at a subsequent time period. So again, going back to some basic ideas about blockchain technology. At a basic level, it's a very familiar concept. What we say, this is a ledger. Those of you who have a commerce background or a business background, you understand what is a ledger, and that's used in the context of financial accounting. But a ledger is basically, from a layman's perspective, we can see this as a record. And similar to a written record, for example, in case of any transaction, we as Muslims, we are supposed to record that in a written form. Now, the written record can be manually written or it can be digitally written. And it can have chapters or blocks of data and information. And further, each block or chapter is added serially and consecutively over time. Now, this is how we deal with the ledgers in the context of business enterprises, and this is how an accountant looks after or takes care of or monitors what comes in and what goes out from out of the company in the context of the company. Now, there are differences between a blockchain ledger and what we generally understand and the common understanding of ledger. First is the blockchain is a shared record, and this is what makes it unique. This is what makes it very different from as a technology, as in fact, all the benefits that are associated with the blockchain, primarily they stem from this idea, from this notion that it is a shared record and it's a distributed record. And it exists in perfectly replicate form in a multitude of locations in the servers of participants. Unlike records, manual or digital, that are centrally controlled and updated by a centralized authority, in the context of blockchain, we are talking about distributed ledger technology, and we are talking about a scenario where no single participant owns the blockchain or prescribes any alterations in it. Any update in a blockchain that requires a consensus amongst all the participants or actors. Therefore, until that consensus is reached, you can rule out a single-handed tampering by any bad actor. It is immutable. How? Because it stores the history of itself back to the first entry. The identity of each new entry is created in part from the identity of the previous entry. So every individual block is thus linked to all that preceded. And that is what it is a serialized, you can see the chain of entries, chain of data, and any unilateral attempt to change its content or identity without the consensus of all the actors is just ruled out. Therefore, this is the feature really that makes blockchain technology fully secure, transparent, and a trust-inducing engine where you don't need an intermediary or to basically ensure the trust aspect. For example, today we want to deposit our money, we go to a bank, and the bank is basically the trust engine that ensures that the money that we deposit is fully secure. And it's going to be, we can claim it anytime we want, and the terms of the product itself or the solution are going to be respected. This is what a bank as an intermediary does in the financial system. But in the case of blockchain, the technology itself is a trust-inducing agency. It takes care of the role that traditionally that the intermediary has been playing. So it involves consensus building that further underline its ethical roots, because the idea of consensus building itself is very, very Islamic, is very, very strongly rooted in ethics. And its emergence in recent years is basically a response to the failure of many traditional institutions that are supposed to guard against fraud and unethical behavior. And we have seen the global financial crisis from time to time, how the traditional systems have failed, the traditional institutions have failed to protect the interest of all the actors and to protect against fraud and unethical behavior. As such, we find that blockchain has very strong merits when seen through the lens of Islam or Islamic economics or Sharia. And when we say Islamic economics, basically we're talking about Sharia, which is a discipline which is rooted in ethics and morality again. Now, we started by saying that this is a session, this webinar is on blockchain for good. Now, when we say good, how do we define it? What is good and what is bad? Now, we can try to define good or goodness, both from the standpoint of, the way they define a mention in Sharia, how Sharia defines goodness, and how, conventionally, how, good is defined. And this is why we have the two broad frameworks that we talk about that we can bring in here, which try to define what is good. One reflects, of course, Sustainable Development Goals, which is kind of captures the consensus of the policymakers across the globe as reflected in the United Nations mandate. And when we say United Nations, we say it's a guardian of collective morality, guardian of collective conscience, and it in a way represents the view of policymakers across the globe. Therefore, when we see these sustainable development goals, there are 17 of them, and now very well defined and very well quoted and understood by by actors in the financial system or the economy. And they're trying to achieve, countries are trying to achieve through the planning and the implementation of the plans, monitor their progress towards achievement of the sustainable development goals. There are clear targets, and they are defined. Again, you can see that there is, these are good targets. These are targets which basically aim at the benefit of the mankind, the benefit of humanity, basically to address the moral challenges, like poverty, for example, the biggest moral challenge of the century. It tries to address these kind of challenges. And we have the Sharia, for example, which is defined, and the purpose of Sharia is good. As they say, it is falah. We can call it falah, or we can call it, we can see this as rahmah or mercy for the mankind. So either way, I know there are many ways that the narratives they go, but we all at the bottom, we understand basically Sharia means good for the humanity, good for the mankind. Now, when we try to see in more concrete form or in terms of framework, we can map one to another. For Maqasid al-Sharia, we have this very broad-based, five-fold classification. They are not cannot be put in very clear watertight compartments, but yes, for the purpose of a good understanding, it's always a good idea to use a classification scheme. Therefore, you find that Sharia, its goal is to not only to protect, but also to nurture 5 dimensions, 5 aspects. One is self, which is nafs, and then you have the protection and nurturing of deen or faith. You have the protection of aql or intellect. Then you have the protection and nurturing of nasl or posterity, or what you call the progeny, the future generations. And finally, you have the protection and nurturing of mal, to ensure conditions, to create conditions where mal can be protected and mal can grow, the property can grow. And that is what any institution, any regulation, or any move, any action that contributes to the enhancement of this maqasid al-Sharia, this is seen as a benefit to the mankind, and anything that is harmful to this has to be shunned, has to be has to be left out, and has to be ruled out from an Islamic economic system. And when we map this, the SDGs, we see very clearly there are very clear mapping that is possible. When it comes to protection and nurturing of self, we find that the SDGs starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they all relate to a good quality life for the individual. And we are talking about ending poverty, we are talking about social protection, we are talking about providing financial services, microfinance or financial inclusion. We are talking about food security for the people, for individuals, and food sovereignty. And we are talking about fair incomes to smallholder farmers and the poorer strata of the society. And we are talking about reducing vulnerabilities of the weaker sections. They could be orphans, they could be single women, they could be internally displaced persons. And we are talking about affordable healthcare provision and providing water, sanitation. These are the basic amenities in life, which goes for protection of nafs. Similarly, we are talking about, when we are talking about faith and deen, in terms of, SDGs, which are generally faith neutral. They don't talk about any specific faith, but even then you can map certain, institutions or certain projects, programs in the Islamic domain, which can contribute to SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, and also which can contribute to partnerships for achieving these different goals. So we can talk about specific projects. We have some examples before you. Creating Islamic institutions, research institutions for peace, justice, with transparency, good governance, and these are all Islamic, they have Islamic roots, and you have very clear-cut traditions or hadiths which underline these aspects of good governance, these aspects of transparency, and these aspects of ethical conduct. And similarly, you have intellect or aql, which occupies a very central theme in the Sharia, and you have the In terms of, again, SDGs, you can see that the projects which involve providing basic education or which are concerned about school enrollment, whether it is rural schools or schools meant for the girl child or schools for the physically impaired, we are basically talking about protection and nurturing of intellect. And we are also talking about creating and maintaining good infrastructure where intellect can be nurtured, whether it can be schools or colleges or institutions of higher learning or research institutions. They all come within this broad category. Similarly, when you're talking about posterity, it is a very important institution which is often neglected is marriage itself, marriage and family, which are basically, you can see this as a nucleus of the society. And if there is corruption in this particular institution, you can perhaps expect, unfortunately, society-wide corruption of values and morality. So therefore, marriage has a very important institution in the protection of nurturing of posterity. And not only that, you have the environment, you have the conservation of forests and natural resources, the oceans, which are very clearly part of the SDGs 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Basically, they try to protect the planet and in the interest of the posterity, in the interest of leaving the earth in a good shape for the future generations. And finally, you have the protection and nurturing of Mal. You have the basic SDGs here again, SDG 8, which is to provide good work, opportunities for work, and freedom to trade and transact. But in the context of Islam, Islamic framework, we see that it has to adhere to certain very specific norms, like it has to be free from riba or interest, which is, as we see, is a tool of exploitation, and it has to be free from gambling and unjust enrichment, which provide a conducive environment for capital formation and lead to reduction in inequalities and social balance. So defining good is, again, this is what the two frameworks we can carry on for the rest of the presentation. And let's see how the blockchain applications, what are the blockchain applications that are possible in achieving this good as we understand. Now, financial inclusion is again a major challenge facing the policymakers across the globe. We know maybe 2/3 in many countries and over 3/4 in many countries, people are unbanked and they don't have access. Unbanked is not the proper word, perhaps. Basically, the word is exclusion from the financial system. They're excluded, and the banks being the primary intermediaries, we use the term unbanked or underbanked. They don't have access. They don't have bank accounts, or they don't have access to other kinds of financial institutions. They could be MFIs or microfinance institutions, or they could be commercial banks or other kinds of financial institutions. The fact is that they do not have, a large majority do not have access to financial services. And here we see a very important need which for social finance and social banks which are dedicated to serving the financially excluded. Because as we know, the mainstream commercial banks, they are reluctant to serve the financially excluded because they are governed by the need to manage their risk factors. And the poor and the excluded, normally they involve high risk. Therefore, being in the high risk category naturally excludes them from, they are no longer, an attractive proposition. Lending to the poor is not an attractive proposition for most of the, formal financial institutions. Therefore, you need an alternative system, and that is what it's possible, can be seen clearly as a possibility with the application of blockchain. You can think in terms of P2P lending, in terms of P2P financing, in terms of, not only that, at a more organized level, you can think of new banks which involve less cost for execution and provide an efficient solution where the identity mechanism of these excluded people, it can be blockchain based using biometric data. So therefore, these are possibilities, but not yet fully tried out, and there is not much empirical evidence. That is why I'm addressing you. Many of you are researchers, so perhaps you can look at these as research questions. That what is a success, the probability of success when we apply, what is the success in terms of adoption, in terms of a solution to the problem of financial exclusion. Can the new banks which are driven by which operate on a blockchain platform, can they, by providing blockchain based identity, can they provide dignity to those thousands and millions we don't have an identity and access to financial services? Similarly, quickly, let me just take you through a few more applications in terms of education, which is a primarily, again, basic need. Times are changing, as we know, that in the last 2 years, we have seen the formal school and university college education has suffered a setback, primarily because of the pandemic. Now, but we have also seen the rise of online teaching, the rise of educational technology, the rise of edtech, and we have seen universities and schools moving on to online education. Now, here we see a very clear blockchain application in validation of the education qualifications of candidate in the corporate sector. You have these use cases already available. If you Google search, you'll find many service providers who provide this kind of service of validation, and that's possible because, again, if you remember, the immutability or the tamper-proof nature of the blockchain. Now, but the broader question is, can blockchain be the new standard to deliver education validations in online teaching portals, which are going to perhaps witness a mushroom growth in the days to come? In the field of youth and empowerment, for example, we can think of these applications of decentralized marketplaces using NFTs for SMEs. We can think in terms of freelancers platform using blockchain-based escrow for remuneration. We can think in terms of women entrepreneurs, providing them a marketplace and distribution platforms for selling their products. And again, here, the broader question is, can blockchain be used to solve these issues using non-fungible tokens or NFTs, as we know? In agriculture, again, the blockchain-based supply chain for traceability and authentication of the food origin, we have seen its importance, and we realize its importance in the context of halal supply chains, where there is an element of trust deficit when it comes to halal certification. You can have spurious halal certification is a serious problem now in many countries, and this has been widely reported in the media also. So in addition to beyond halal certification by known agencies, what do we have? We have these blockchain applications which can really ensure which can trace the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, and authenticate the origin. Now, in the context of halal, or let's say we are talking about in a more general context, organic farming, which is costlier. But what guarantees that the produce that you find on the shelves, which command a higher price, they are, they can be traced to organic farming. Now, this is where blockchains can help the farmers by ensuring the authenticity of the products and also fetch a better price for the farmers. Now, in the health sector, again, we know that medical records, the database of medical records, how difficult it is to create a centralized database, and the possibility of tampering or sharing of such data, which can be very sensitive issue for many. So this is where, again, blockchain comes to the can offer a solution. And in many countries where you have a consolidated medical history is lacking, where there is a possibility that blockchain database can be used to solve this problem. Now, when we say good, basically we are looking at humanity or humanitarian assistance. So you have the humanitarian assistance providers, and which face a lot of problem when they're dealing with internally displaced people, or let's say people who have lost everything, and including their identity papers. So they don't have any, no longer they have the identity papers to prove their identity. And also there's another problem when the humanitarian assistance is provided to them through normally through vouchers and such papers. There is always a possibility of duplication of them or leakages in the system and the misuse of the vouchers. Here again, we find the blockchain applications coming up. We have blockchain-based vouchers, which ensure that the entire chain of assistance it starts with the digital identity, and it goes on to the point where such assistance is finally distributed, or it reaches the beneficiary. So it can provide digital identity to ensure transparency and accountability. It can ensure identification and monitoring of the beneficiaries. We all know that how important it is to us as zakat payers, that to ensure that our money, the funds we donate as zakat or we give as zakat, we are also accountable for its end use. But when we are using a platform or a third party for distribution of zakat, it's very important for us to see for ourselves who are the beneficiaries, and do they really qualify to be beneficiaries? Do they fall under the category of the 8 asnaf, which are eligible according to Sharia to receive zakat? So this is where again, blockchain can contribute along with AI to not only identify the beneficiaries, but also monitor how funds move from your wallet as a muzakki or a zakat payer into the hands of the beneficiaries, ultimate beneficiaries. So here we have seen, certain products or solutions, blockchain-based vouchers and tokens, which allow documentation of information such as eligibility, entitlement packages, and implementation of a system which requires automated periodic payments. This all can be ensured through smart contracts and which can be blockchain-based. And also, we can see there's a possibility of instantaneous and costless transfers with cryptos. Now, if you look at the conventional remittance system, the cost of remittance can be very, very high, can be as high as 20%, 25%, 30% in some cases, depending upon the location. But you try to do that with cryptos, and some of the cryptos that we use in IBFNet, the Algorand protocol can ensure instantaneous transfers at zero cost, cost that is as negligible as zero. So we have the use cases. Now we come to the use cases. Here you have IBFNet playing a role primarily in the Islamic social finance space. It's IBF Recurrence. It's basically a recurring charity based on milestones achieved by the project implementation, and which basically ensures periodic release of funds under an overall large commitment. And you also have IBF Benevolence, which is the first of its kind in the industry to bring together two kinds of sadaqah, which is sadaqah of time and sadaqah of money. So both are integrated in this particular platform and unitized in this particular platform. So a project can not only raise funds, but also volunteers through this platform. So these are again, blockchain-based platforms where every single transaction is recorded on the blockchain, and then the cryptos are used as incentivization mechanism for the donors and for the volunteers and for the contributors. And you have the Islamic endowments again. There is a very clear possibility of or clear benefit to Islamic endowments when they come onto the blockchain, because globally it is a serious problem. The loss or encroachment of endowed properties or waqf properties, or misuse of waqf properties is a serious problem. And this is where blockchain can provide a solution for preservation of waqf assets, and also the development of the waqf assets that can make use of smart contracts where the terms of the contract are immutable. And that is where we'll create trust for the partners, for the contributors, for the waqf itself, to get back the developed property after a certain number of years, which could be as long as 25, 30 years. So it's a smart contract which will now govern the process, which will automate the process of the ownership transfer eventually into the hands of the waqf. Therefore, and also in the interim cash flows that are supposed to be paid to the developers, to the private capital providers, that can also be ensured through smart contracts. So of course, you have here undiluted emphasis on stipulated and designated beneficiaries, and you can ensure that the benefits out of the waqf eventually they flow into the hands of the designated beneficiaries. Now I'll quickly go to the rest of the slides, and basically to make my final point, which is about environment, which is about going green. And here I have to underline the point that one needs to make the right choice about the protocol, because we have seen, and generally it is believed by many that blockchain is destructive for the environment. This is not uniform across all protocols. Yes, there are protocols which basically involve use of a lot of electricity. In fact, There are many studies which have been done which say that the Bitcoin mining alone, it consumes more electricity than many countries like Pakistan, like countries in Europe, Sweden, and so on. So different studies have reported different results, but they are, there's a consensus among all the studies, the results, that certain types of protocol which require, mining of the tokens based on the what we call the proof of work protocol, proof of work consensus mechanism. Basically, it involves a lot of electricity and it is environmentally destructive. But we have also more and more green protocols coming up. One good example is the Algorand. You can see the electricity consumption is almost minimal in per transaction as compared to Ethereum and Bitcoin. And additionally, for this very low level of electricity consumption, you also have a counterbalancing mechanism in place, which is called the Green Pledge, under which the Algorand and Climate Trade, they will implement a sustainability oracle, which will notarize Algorand's carbon footprint on chain for each set of blocks. And then through the smart contracting mechanism, Algorand will then lock the equivalent amount of carbon credits as an Algorand standard asset into a green treasury so that its protocol keeps running as carbon negative. So it is, managed in such a way that the end result is that the Algorand protocol becomes carbon negative. Now, coming to use cases again, this is the last use case and the slide, perhaps that a couple of slides, perhaps more on this particular topic. IBFNet and Greenwood of Indonesia partnership. This is one that we are indeed proud of. Our association with the Greenwood of Indonesia, whose main objective, mission, is to use Waqf land and convert this Waqf land, which is non-arable, which is not used for cultivation, and which is basically now not giving any benefit, to convert this land. And in Indonesia, it is estimated there are around 14 million hectares of such land. Now, this particular ISR or foundation, we call it Greenwood Foundation. It works with other Waqf, players like Muhammadiyah Waqf, and it's trying to plant tamanu trees, which are known for their carbon savings feature, and they save. They're estimated to save about 6 to 7 times more carbon than an average tree. So, and then what is the role of IBFNet? It is going to convert the carbon savings from these trees into green cryptos. So there is an additional benefit in terms of environmental protection, which comes with the plantation. And these cryptos reflect real values to the economy. But then additionally, on a platform called Confluence, IBFNet has created an impact exchange where this carbon savings turned green cryptos can be traded and can be acquired by parties which want to make an instant impact in the green space. So this is a social conference platform giving social cryptos. It basically converts impact, which is the green impact, carbon savings against specific metrics, into green cryptos. So now new projects can earn or liquidate their cryptos at the platform to alter their impact score and risk return impact profile. And it's basically a B2B solution that enables projects to maintain a balanced or a targeted risk return impact profile in a transparent way. And so it solves a long-standing problem that you don't have to wait, you don't have to plant yourself to create a green impact, or you cannot make an investment and wait for indefinite or pretty long period of time by the time those plants grow and then they have the impact. Here we do things in a reverse way, that the plantation is already there, the trees have already been planted, and we try to measure the carbon savings. And the carbon savings that is actually done, they are converted into cryptos, so they can be easily acquired or liquidated through the market mechanism. So this is what again IBFNet has to offer, and I'll end my presentation here, and we can take questions on this, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Beth, for that enlightening presentation. The last part about green work and green cryptos was really interesting. And I would like to invite all our viewers who would like to learn more to find more details about this project and many others that the doctor mentioned on IBFNet's social media. All right. So for our second presentation, I would like to invite Brother Rizal Brower to take the stage. Over to you, Brother Rizal.
Hello, good morning. Assalamualaikum. How are you today? Allow me to present it a topic about blockchain oriented software engineering. My name is Rizal Brur Bahwares. I am from UIN, Jakarta. The content of this presentation is have a few parts. One is literature review, motivation, concept and idea, challenges, research direction, and present research direction in 2021. This is an illustration of blockchain-oriented software engineering. Some part is a blockchain, some part is software engineering, coding-oriented, and so on and so on. Let me start by literature review. Most part of this paper is based on blockchain-oriented software engineering, challenge and new direction by Simon Porn and Michael Mercy, both of them from University of Calgary, Italy. This paper have been synthesized by almost 300, that exactly 268, and can categorize this by a highly citation paper. From that paper, we see the motivation is because of a concept of blockchain and smart contract. We should think it, a blockchain is another thing like the internet. Wide adoption of blockchain technology has the potential of reshaping and current financial service, technical and infrastructure. You see, this is a statistic about Bitcoin around 2014 and 2016. It's remind us of about internet era in the early day when we see the Google, Yahoo, Cisco, Amazon, when they start by startup, they are startup a company at the time. You can see in December 2021, cryptocurrency price chart and market capitalizations that I take from the coinmarketcaps.com. The evaluation is already so big. And also we see the portfolio, some coin have bearish, some coin have bullish, and so on and so on. Sorry. All of this have contributed to software development practice newly software project rapidly born based on this new trend. And now we talk about blockchain technology. The key behind the blockchain technology is a cryptocurrency. Sorry, the key behind the Bitcoin is blockchain. And Bitcoin is some kind part of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin was invited in 28 as peer-to-peer electronic cash system. This is an example comparison between traditional bank and blockchain distributed ledger system, or we can call it blockchain bank. This is also an example of traditional compared to blockchain when we are transferring some part of money in some cases. There is no intermediary in blockchain, but when we are using the traditional one, it's a lot of intermediary and a lot of cost for that. This is the detail of what we've been talking about. In traditional, they're using batch process, and in blockchain, they're using block or decentralized process. And the ledger for the blockchain is decentralized and public, and for traditional is closed one and by one trusted party. Normally is in Indonesia is Bank Indonesia, or in US is Federal Reserve. Now scam part is about a concept, an idea, use case, blockchain oriented software. This some part we see in BPM model. Some part we using blockchain technology in the procedure and process. This is also example of programming in smart contract using Solidity. And this is example on the idea of blockchain and relational database. Some challenge. Because of new challenge, new trend, we need some new professional rules. The skill is compromising in finance, law, and technology expertise. And other challenge is security and reliability. In software engineering, we need mathematical model, new development lifecycle, and new testing model to check the security and the reliability. And another challenge is software architecture. We need a new software architecture that adopts side by technology blockchain. For example, Ethereum has adopted a simplicity database using a key value store. And challenge in modeling language. Blockchain-oriented system might require specialist graphic model for representation. More specifically, existing model like the old OML diagram need to be modified and create new one to adjust a blockchain oriented system specification. And the metric for software is also one part of the challenge. We can use goal question metric method, and we can find specific metrics that require to measure complexity, communication capability, resource consumption of the blockchain. And some part challenge also in repository area. Building data set of blockchain-oriented software or system. In that research, Moody identify is more than 120 publicly announced blockchain projects. And the first 70% it's the most capitalized cryptocurrency and asset at coin market cap. This study using the open source repository GitHub that provide homogeneous metadata which allow us to compare the project. From 1,184 repository, after compromise process, we identify 52 GitHub account. That information that we extract is one is popularity, or we call it stargazer, and programming language, community involvement, who's contribute, open issue, watcher, and folks, and their age, time elapsed since creation. In repository side, that research focused on most relevant repository that had been based for repository, had been updated in the previous 30 days, were created more than 30 days before, and by using this criteria, we retain 193 repository out of the initial 1,000 something. When we see the pie chart of comparison of longitude across 190 repository, we see the most famous and the most used language programming in the blockchain is JavaScript, and followed by the Go, and so on and so on. JavaScript, Python, Go, C++, and Ruby are the top 5 languages. JavaScript repository accounting more than 30 of the total population. Python and Go programming is on the podium. And Java repository not reaching 4% of the total. That means Java repository is very lag behind compared to other programming languages. We see in the table, there is popularity, contribution, open issue, XD, watcher, fork, and first language. And we see the some GitHub repository project. I will not talk too detail about that. We see the other research direction. We come to part of research direction. Research direction, some part is about testing. In the paper of P.S. Kushar, Bisada, entitled Adoption of Software Testing, Open Source, blah, 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 they investigate the same can be said about blockchain-oriented software quick. blockchain-oriented software. Bitcoin repository has 400 GitHub contributors as reported. That means Bitcoin is very active project programming language in GitHub. And we also, based on that pie chart and the table, language programming like Go, Python, and Ruby are interesting to be researched. And we need also research direction and collaboration that based on the table, collaboration is need synergy, and we need to develop a community highly beneficial from blockchain-oriented system. Now we see in 2021, there's a conference, exactly a virtual conference at summer 2021. This conference is called International Workshop on Blockchain-Oriented Software. World. In this conference, topic about management cryptocurrency is among the most popular topic. Countries like USA and China are leading and they are exploit all blockchain potential. And we see there is interesting topic to be followed up. For example, smart contract testing, application in economy and finance in the blockchain, supply chain, Web 3.0, e-commerce, e-health, e-democracy, social network, and so on and so on. This work has been been cite. We are cite many paper, but the most paper that we cite is you can see in the figure there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brother Rizal, for your presentation. That was really an eye-opener, and we got to learn so many new things. And I hope a lot of our attendees who are very new to this also got something new to learn about, and they can research furthermore into this and start their journey to learn about blockchain and the other stuff that we've mentioned in our presentations today. Moving forward, we would now like to invite Brother Herbert Abdullah, who was a student of Brother Rizal, to share more about their research on blockchain. So, Brother Herbert, if you're ready, the floor is all yours, inshallah.
Thank you. Okay, wait. Okay. Okay, wait. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Herbert Abdullah. I'm a student of Mr. Rizal Bihawarus and currently doing research on blockchain, blockchain in education using Hyperledger Fabric. So, continuing presentation before, there are 3 types of blockchain. Sorry, there are 2 types. the non-blockchain one is the centralized one. Yeah. For example, if we do a transfer in bank, for example, we use bank A and then we transfer some money to bank C, we using intermediaries. For example, we use central bank, Bank Indonesia, or we use in Bank Indonesia, there are some method like clearing, RTGS, real-time gross settlement, or using ATM bersama, which is cost 6,500 rupiah. So in current scenario, the transaction is computed on the central bank. So all the computation is done on the central bank, and then central bank take some fee to do that transaction. So basically, if the central bank is there are some problem or error, we can do anything, yeah, because all depends on the central bank. Okay, so the public permissionless blockchain one, like Ethereum and Bitcoin, solve the problem using decentralized manners. Yeah. So the transaction is computed on the miner. Anyone can be miner. Who is the miner? The miner is people who do the transaction. Anyone can be miner just by some computer with good graphic card, a GPU, and then they can be a miner. Okay. So the miner will facilitate the transaction, and then the miner is compete against all other miner to do the transaction, and then the winning miner one will be get the reward, the mining fee. So anyone can participate, and this on top of cryptocurrency, yeah, because if we want to do smart contract things, we must pay some cryptocurrency too, yeah, to the miner, because the miner runs the smart contract on their computer. In Ethereum, the name of our price is gas, yeah. So every contract has a different gas price, yeah. Okay, and the last one is private permissionless blockchain, yeah. The example is Hyperledger Fabric and R3 Corda. For example, like the bank before, if bank A want to transfer to bank C, we can transfer directly, yeah, without intermediaries. So the transaction is computed on related party, bank A and bank B. So it's computed twice. And then if the computation result is of both parties is same, and then the data will be recorded on the immutable ledger. Once the data is recorded on immutable ledger, it cannot be changed. So this is computed twice, and then only selected party can participate, because this is private permissioned blockchain. So there are no cryptocurrency in here. So you must to maintain your own infrastructure. So the bank must set up the infrastructure for the Hyperledger Fabric. Yeah, so there are basically two types, yeah, public permissionless and private permissionless. So we are using Hyperledger Fabric in our research. There is Hyperledger Fabric is a platform or framework for the private permission net blockchain. It's initiated by IBM, and then now it's owned by Linux Foundation, house of the open source project. And then until now, there are many top company, yeah, and top consultant using that, yeah. Although it's only for the proof of concept, yeah, there are still no production use for this, only proof of concept, but the result is already shown, yeah. For example, it's reduced the reconciliation time if there are different data we expect from another party. Hyperledger Fabric will solve that, yeah, because there are no intermediaries and the data is consistent. It's save a lot of time for reconciliation of misintegrated data. And then from the platform one, we can use platform as a service like on AWS using Amazon Managed Blockchain, or Oracle Cloud using Oracle Blockchain Platform, and the other cloud provider already support Hyperledger Fabric deployment. Yeah, how about in education ya? Yeah, first of all we must do some research ya. Is our problem will be solved by blockchain or not ya? Because not all problem require blockchain ya. Only small set of a problem in the world need a blockchain. So Wust and Gervais create the methodology to decide is our problem need blockchain ya. So but Dongle in 2020 said education blockchain in education is needed ya, and it leads to permission blockchain. And then the adoption of the blockchain technology within education is in early stage ya, only proof of concept ya. Why all party try to research on education blockchain? Because of accountability and transparency ya, like degree, fake degree, and then like that ya. And then in 26 to 2020, there are 80 publication on blockchain and education. The most recognized one is the Blockchains by MIT in 2018, and then Sony Global Education in 2017. Yeah. So basically, our research, we do so Dongol use Hyperledger Fabric ya to store academic record and certificate issuance on Hyperledger Fabric. So basically, all data is located on Hyperledger Fabric. And then there are Delgado in 2021. He proposed a prototype ya, not only using blockchain but also use off-chain ya. Some of data located outside the blockchain. He located on RDBMS. Why he located the data outside the blockchain? Because first is for it's more scalable, it's more fast, and then the second one, it's related to GDPR ya. Because once the data is stored on blockchain, it cannot be deleted. So if we want to delete the data, we must put outside the blockchain. And then our research, we use Hyperledger Fabric, and then we use Hyperledger Fabric feature private data collection for storing confidential data related to GDPR. So we can delete it when we need it. And then we use it for academic record, certificate, and certificate issuance. Then we will evaluate using throughput and scalability. Okay, I think it's enough. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Herbert, for sharing about your research and the work that the team is doing. So with this, it brings us to a wrap for today's webinar. We would like to thank our esteemed speakers for taking the time out to join us today and to share so many beneficial points with us. We would also like to thank all our viewers who've joined us today from across the globe for being with us today on this educative journey. So we'll be having many more such webinars down the line. So to make sure that you make the most of it and you don't miss out on our future webinars, please do follow IBFNet on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you'll get all your updates over there. And as promised earlier, all the attendees for the webinar will also be getting special IBF crypto tokens, and we'll be sending out an email to you very soon that will be explaining how you could use or even redeem these tokens within our ecosystem. So with that, thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.